So there's big news in the recycling and sustainability industry. Two big innovators, Umincorp and Renewcell, have declared bankruptcy. So today I'm going to ask Petros a few questions about it.
Sounds good. Good morning, Alexia. And
Good morning, Petros.
it's an
How are
interesting
you?
topic. It's cool. Yeah, I'm good. So it's an interesting topic. Yeah, especially because they're big innovators in the space. So they're companies that were leading the space in the recycling space of Europe, and Europe's been counting a lot on transitioning a lot into this strong and high tech infrastructure around recycling or as the basis to our transition to the circular economy. So I think it is a bit of a setback. I'll call it a setback. I don't think it's anywhere close to being anything dramatic. It's like most innovations, you see very fast growth moments, and then things slow down a bit, and you have to go back to the drawing board, and you need to see where things went wrong and go back to it again until you nail it. And I think circular economy as a whole is a bit this type of journey, although we would like to see it move faster than it is. Yeah.
Okay, so
what
fire
are you?
ahead.
Yes.
So Petros, how do you think this impacts the recycling industry, and what are the implications in our transition to the circular economy?
Okay, so like I said, I mean, if we look at the recycling industry, we until now globally we relied on what we call mechanical recycling. Yeah, and with evolution of innovation and technology, we are hoping into two types of new type of technologies. That's chemical recycling and biological recycling. Okay, with that phase of innovation. So chemical recycling was the next in line, and biological was supposed to go above that. I think we'll still see both happen. I think circular economy is here to stay. For many reasons. In Europe, it's a strategic move for the continent. Europe is a continent that doesn't have a lot of raw materials. We depend on importing these raw materials. And we know very well in the European Union that our best chance of sourcing our own raw materials for our industries are in our waste streams. Okay, so I have no doubt that this is just a blip in the road, and we'll find our feet again, and everything will continue to evolve. So for the recycling industry, I think there is so the recycling industry it's based on margins. Okay, so the unit economics are really tough. It means that basically they're up against the fight of against virgin materials. So basically cheaper and cheaper virgin materials on the market, and these type of high-tech industries having to come up and compete. The output of their manufacturing, of their productions, has to compete with these very cheap raw materials. Okay, that's the first part. Okay, and that's what happened to Renewcell. Basically, they're competing. They have a good solid, they had an innovative byproduct or core output, which didn't seem to have as much demand as they expected. That's normal. It's normal at the early stages, right? Over time, you scale the business. As the business scales, these unit economics come down, and the whole thing starts to work. And we know this. A very good example to take reference from is carbon absorption technologies from the atmosphere. There's a company called Climeworks in Europe, in Switzerland, and they absorb carbon from the atmosphere as a solution to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that we produce. What do we know? Again, the unit economics don't work. So there is this thing, I think, where what the recycling industry needs to, or the circular economy as a whole needs to see is basically we can't just work on the unit economics. There's an intrinsic value to everything. There's a story to be said. And I think Climeworks really worked that out kind of well. Meaning, what does that mean? It means as soon, and we know that from the linear economy, as soon as you add a story to the item, to the product, and you add a story, that links the consumer to this whole journey, then the unit economics start to become a little bit more flexible. What does that mean? For instance, why does a sneaker that we manufacture badly or negatively or not, why does a sneaker that cost physically in its physical form 20, 30 euros is actually being sold for 200 euros? Yeah. That's the intrinsic value of the item. It's the value that of the consumer puts onto this product, which is just like thin air. Okay, a bit like money. We somehow out of thin air, and it's the same. The value of money. The value of money is a piece of paper. We don't, and at the end, it's just like thin air. It's just a perception. So I think circular economy needs to start factoring that in, to see a way how they factor that intrinsic value of circular economy and the perception of consumers into their unit economics, so that they can make the system work. Okay. So what does it mean for circularity? Like I said before, I think circularity is circular economy in Europe is here to stay, because it's a strategic political move for the European Union. For companies also, I think it might be a setback for the big clothing companies. They were basing on this to detach themselves a bit from the whole take, make, waste model, have cool stories to talk about somehow. But it doesn't mean the technology is dead. Okay, the technology is valuable, and we know that, and I think the fashion industry knows that. What we just need to do is the business model needs to be played around a bit, how we deliver, how the feedstock is coming to companies like Renewcell, what support they need from the European Union. For instance, Climeworks, we know that Climeworks is not needed a lot of support, how do you call it, subsidy support to make it work. And it will come around. So it's just a setback, I would say, and
a bump on the road.
Yes, a bump on the road. Yeah.
And why do you think this happened to these two big innovators?
So I think, like I said before, and we saw this in 2022 with the circular economy too, more on the service side. Okay, so maybe it's the time for the industrial engineering side. So there's two elements to this. Okay, when you build an industrial innovation, every time you move a phase upwards in your innovation, so every time you move to scale the innovation until it becomes commercially viable, it requires a lot of money. Okay, and the whole it's crazy amount of money. It's like, so when you move from the lab and then you go into like a field lab, and then you move into a commercial pilot project, and then from commercial pilot project, all the components that are needed to make these things work, they're just so much bigger and so much extensive and so much more operationally heavy, that basically somebody needs to be pumping money into this until it's economy of scale, that it can be self-sufficient. And many technologies in the industrial world suffer because of this. Okay, they don't make the market without the necessary grant support or innovation support. Usually it comes from public grants to support this scaling capabilities. That's the first part. And like I said before, I think what's really missing here, circular economy is a system. Yeah. So we're trying to make these individual units function on their own and be viable on their own. And I think we need to, as a circular, it's harder said than done. I think it's part of the work that iKeep is trying to do. Is Renewcell on its own it will be very hard to make it as an individual unit function. So we need to see it as a greater system, and how the system together needs to function rather than individual technology.
Yeah.
That's that. So, and we call it in innovation, we call it ecosystem, systemic ecosystem innovation. So how do all the components, all the parts work together? So it's what we say, the whole is greater than its parts.
So everyone needs to work together then for it to actually work out, not just one person by its own.
Yeah, and on the economy, but I really believe what circular economy needs, it needs to factor in this intrinsic value. That's what made linear economy boom, right? It's not just about I put these materials into a sneaker, into a t-shirt, into a car. It's not about the itemized physical elements. It's a lot about our perception of what is the value that we see there. and we add a big weight of the economic element is based on perceived value. And this needs to happen also in the circularity, in the other part of the loop, if you want. That yeah, I think
yeah, thanks.
yeah.
Thanks for
But I
answering.
wouldn't. I mean, we saw it around, and it is sad. It's always sad to see. I mean, it's always hard. Like I said, I don't think the technology disappears. The company might, but like it's sad to see really innovators, leaders in the space. They act like a beacon, a lighthouse where everybody's supposed to follow. And I think that is where, if you're from an outsider, you see it and you're like, oh, but I don't think that's the case. It's just going back to the drawing board. You need to fine-tune things. Innovation and systemic change happens on the detail, just like a very strong athlete, right? Like any amazing athlete or any expert in your job, it's the details that make you win the game. It's not the big picture. It's when you that, and I think that's what's just needed. The recycling industry in Europe is going to continue to grow. We know this. It's not that it's no doubt about it. And I just think that between, and this is something that we can discuss together at another call. Again, I don't think energy recovery, so what we call incineration or energy recovery from waste, recycling secondhand, are not independent components. They all function together to maximize the output, the resource output potential of an individual product. So we need to stop seeing them as individual units and functioning as individual units, and really enabling the ecosystem to work together. So secondhand with recycling, with energy recovery, if you think of a product over its life cycle, of its length of time, it's a combination of all three. You keep it in the secondhand market for as long as possible. You repair it, you keep it running, you keep it circulating there. But at some very realistic point, it stops. It's just been worn and torn so much. You need to go into a type of recycling or component recovery model. And then even there, sometimes the material is just worn so much, it shouldn't end up in a landfill, but it will end up in an energy recovery type of system. I think when all three components function together, then we start to seeing a real holistic waste management model, and that should slowly transition us. We should aim to that in terms of a circular economy.
Sounds good. Well, let's hope that happens then.
Yeah, and that's how we will see it, make it happen. IKEEP has its role to play there. And you, me, and Chris, and all the team will continue doing our work to make it happen.
Of course we will. Right. Thank you for your time, Pedros, and we'll speak soon.
We'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye.